Ladies and gentlemen, your attention please. I would like to invite you to go back to your table so we can have a summary of this afternoon session, please. All right, everyone. I know it has been a long and very intense day and a lot to discuss, but I would like to invite you to go back to your table so we can have a quick recap of what has been discussed this afternoon. Before I invite the moderators of the 3 parallel sessions, I would like to make 2 announcements. One, right after this meeting, would it be possible for the people who will help with the facilitation tomorrow to stay over and to meet with us at this corner of the room? Thank you. And the second announcement is more of a request. We are looking for 2 brave and courageous volunteers who will be up for some creative recap tomorrow morning first thing, and we would love that it's come from your perspective. You have been listening to all the presentations. So is there anyone who feel like coming on stage starting sharp 8:30 in the morning to recap what we have been through today? If so, please indicate your name to my dear colleague, either Peter or Hani, sitting at this table. All right? So meanwhile, I would like to invite the moderators of this afternoon. So the parallel session number 1 on children affected by armed conflict, the session on collaboration with existing programming, and the moderators from the session on non-formal education and safe school to join me on stage. Thank you. All right, I know we're here. Did you have any facilitators in the other group? Great. Welcome on stage.
Thank you. So it has been a very fruitful and interesting discussion amongst education, child protection services, and interventions for children and adolescents affected by conflict, and particularly those affected by forced recruitment and being at risk of recruitment. So it was difficult to conclude and to get to 1, 2, or 3 points, but we have been trying with my colleague from UNHCR to summarize that. So 3 points that we want to share today with you is coming out of the 4 interesting presentations are the following. Joint protection and education programming increases access and retention in schools of children at risk and those that have been former child soldiers, as well as early help to identify in an early way those that need specific protection services and be able to timely refer them to those services. The second point that came out is that the coordination between education and child protection clusters, as well as Ministry of Education and Ministry of Social Affairs at field level, allow to address the diverse and simultaneous needs of children affected by armored conflict. And that has been underlined the need that has to be done at field level. And the third point, if I don't mistaken, because I didn't find it clearly, is that although the project has been very successful to reach the objectives they had been proposed in terms of protection and education, there has been some question mark about how they can be scaled up and how they can be, in a way, replicated in similar but contexts. Our colleagues from DRC that are working on prevention and addressing former child soldiers' needs say yes, which is quite encouraging, but other questions were around whether the interventions at that, in the area of former child soldiers can be successful enough if they don't address the community vulnerabilities that are, in a way, generating or provoking facilitating the recruitment, the forced recruitment of children and adolescents in armored groups. And that's question, unfortunately, we didn't get an answer because we didn't have enough time to address.
Thank you, Marina. And I just would like as well to thank both Marina and Janice for their great support in terms of translations. I have received very positive feedback, and it was great to be able to hear voice from the field from other colleagues without any language barrier. So thank you very much, you two. I'm going to invite you, the group number 2, on the collaboration for existing within existing programming to come and give us a feedback.
Thank you so much. My name is Ikali Karvinen, coming from Finn Church Aid. I promised that we'll give like 2 minutes each, and I'm using my 1 minute by just describing that what were the topics. So we were learning play-based approach, how play and sports can be empowering children in various ages, and that was an example from the Right to Play. We learned how to support access to education in Iraq, and especially how to connect vulnerable children to specialized services. We were even figuring out that where the birds disappeared, and found out how Syrian children are paying the heaviest bill in the war, and how the Turkey and Syria-based Children of One World NGO is helping on cash education and child protection. We learned from Israel how to integrate the education and child protection, and the case example came from Dominica, and that was the child-centered approach on education. And then finally we had a presentation about the community-based project, how to fight against child labor among the host and refugee communities, and how the project has been implementing or using also child labor in emergencies toolkit. What was very similar to each of these presentations, they were actually highlighting the importance of working with the teachers, and beyond the teachers also with the multi-professional cooperation, especially when we are connecting children with the specialized services. Along the line also the parents' role was highlighted. How we need to find new ways to address the issues with the parents and the local communities. Then one quite important issue was how we use the terminology. One project gave example how they changed the terminology from child protection to child well-being, and this was to remind us that how when we are working in the local communities and with the children who are necessarily not educated, how the terminology is actually very important, and what kind of concepts we are using. So these 4 points were very similar to all of these presentations.
Good afternoon. My name is Joy. I'm from World Vision. So I will pick up from where my colleagues stopped. And I think the panels discuss a lot of the common key activities for both child protection and education, but they also highlight some of the considerations that we should have when we have all the goodwills for the marriage of child protection and education. And hopefully this is not a forced marriage for both sectors. So we need to consider those while we are implementing the integrated program. One is we really need to consider when we are offering training for teachers to do all the referrals or different or complex cases, do they also see their role in these activities? Sometimes we are kind of having the goodwill, oh, so we come to train you, but at the end of the day, they think this is not their responsibility. So it's good that you train them, but at the end of the day, the referral, the actions might be low. So we need to take this into consideration when we are offering some support to the teachers, specifically on child protection activities. The other consideration that we should have is we also need to maybe prepare the mindset of the teachers, how they see the holistic development of a child or the overall child well-being, so that they don't just focus on the educational outcome, but also for the protection outcome and other outcomes that they can contribute to the child development. And I think that kind of mindset is really difficult when they are themselves struggling in their work. Sometimes they don't get paid, or they are interrupted with their schoolwork, or they have so many family issues, while we are also asking them to take care of all the other children that they are teaching. So we also need to consider that whether that is also the right timing to add more burden to this particular group of beneficiary that we are engaging in our child protection and education work. The other points that the group has highlighted is about the engagement with the government and the ministry. In some locations, there are really imbalanced capacity between the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Social Welfare or Social Affairs. So if we need to bring them onto the same table and they have like this gap, how do you try to address this and to bridge the gaps that they have or talk about this in the same language? I think that's a huge challenge that we need to address as a petitioner. The other thing is also during emergencies, I think people want to jump on things, and there are common issues that are addressed by both child protection and education ministries. So if there is no standard TOR or no standard protocol, then there's kind of competition also between them. So in that chaotic situation, how we can also manage this dynamic and competition. That is another key thing that we need to consider. And then the third point, which is the last point that I want to highlight, is from the case studies that was presented, it's usually use one sector as the entry point. Either it's the education as an entry point or child protection as an entry point, with some indicator that incorporate in the project design. But with that kind of mindset to begin with, we might be missing a lot of opportunities on how to measure and achieve both outcomes. And also, maybe also, we already have that mindset, so when we are talking about integrated, but still with different focus, then it's also difficult to change when we are implementing the program at a later stage. So maybe one approach is we don't have child protection team or education team, we have an integrated team. And we just give this name as a child well-being team or integrated team so that people are not set in their sector. So that's all I want to share. Thank you.
Thank you, team number 2, and thank you for that summary, knowing that you had an extra presentation as well, so well done for keeping the time. Calling the last group or pair, we'll be summarizing the parallel session on non-formal education and safety in schools.
Great. Hey, everyone. My name is Bukeni, and I am the Executive Director for Watchlist on Children and Armed Conflict. We had a very, very interesting panel this afternoon in the room that had the yellow tag. So we had so many examples from the field. We had presentations from AFC, from Save the Children, from the Norwegian Refugee Commission, and from World Vision. The AFC example focused on the education in Syria, where AFC is doing some groundwork linking, the parent and showing the role of the parents, in education as they work together with their children. And then Save the Children focused its presentation on their work in Somalia, where, of course, we all know Somalia, where their groundwork is very much programmatic, and also linking to some of the challenges and opportunities that they were getting, and also the progress they have made in terms of education in Somalia, where they work with both, public sector and also private sector. We also heard from the Norwegian Refugee Commission, where they focus their work on Afghanistan, where they work on, the risks on the protection of schools. We know, this is a country, of course, as Somalia and Syria are affected by armed conflict, so the protection of schools becomes a big challenge. So the Norwegian Refugee Commission has even commissioned a study showing the gaps in the evidence that is being collected and how those evidences can be used for advocacy. We also heard from World Vision International, focusing on the experiences in Nicaragua, where the different faith-based come together to strengthen the education of children in Nicaragua. The presenter was very creative, using imagery, but also some kind of groundwork in terms of how these faith-based organizations do come together to strengthen education and what the role they play in strengthening that education. We also had various questions from the participants, and one of the key questions was how do we ensure that these big organizations do really conceive their programs in a way that can link from the headquarters to the field. Other questions were around funding issue. How do you make sure the funding actually breaks the gap between what the programs are intending to achieve versus some of the reality that comes on when a program is being implemented. So I'm going to invite my colleague Sonia to add a few more things that we'll talk on the debate.
Yeah, I already mentioned a few, so that's fantastic. But I was just going to speak to a few of the other kind of commonalities or questions that emerged in discussion. One being interacting with faith-based communities as kind of a commonality between the presentations and different methodologies that you might use to navigate conversations around kind of child protection with these variety of actors. The other one that was already mentioned, but kind of a buy-in at a headquarter level to local and national levels, and whether or not all of these case studies are coming primarily from maybe relationships and kind of personal buy-in versus a systematic programming coming from top-down headquarter level. So I think that's kind of something interesting. We're seeing all of these case studies on integrated programming, but we're here today speaking about the need for more coordination, right? So we're seeing it at a local level and how to kind of bridge that conversation. And then finally, a question around, like, are we front-loading education systems? We had a number of presentations on new tools, toolkits, resources, studies, so many useful guides emerging from a variety of actors, but often in kind of siloed approaches and maybe not being shared, and actors not knowing that one thing is taking place somewhere while another agency is also developing a similar toolkit. So just ensuring that we're working to kind of complement each other and not reproducing tools that might just feel redundant or confusing at the field level. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. This was very interesting. I think time has come to end our first day. I have to say that we had a lot of good food for thoughts. I could hear some discussions already here and there. And I know some of the presentation have triggered already further thinking and debate. And today was really the day where we wanted to set up the scene, have a snapshot of what is currently happening to help us to have more in-depth discussion for tomorrow. So this said, before you go, just a quick reminder that the volunteers for facilitation for tomorrow, you are weighted to join a meeting right after, and that we are still looking for 2 courageous volunteers to do a short recap tomorrow morning first thing. We will start at 8:30. Any volunteers? Great. Thank you so much. Anyone else? Perfect. So may I kindly ask you to quickly go to Hani, Dean, and Peter, so we will explain to you very quickly what we are expecting from you. And meanwhile, we wish you a very fruitful evening, hoping that you're gonna be able to see that opportunity to be the 2 sectors together, to keep going with more informal discussion, but hopefully with very good discussion. Have a lovely evening, everyone, and looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you.